I've been asked to write this more times than I can count. Friends, therapists, people who heard the story secondhand and want to know if it's true. The truth is that I no longer know what is real. I was 26 years old when it happened, driving from Oregon to Pennsylvania after my father's funeral. That part I'm certain of. Everything else exists in that strange in-between state, like trying to remember a dream you had years ago. It was late October, and I had been on the road for 3 days. I remember the light that afternoon, thin and pale, filtering through clouds that seemed too low. I was somewhere between eastern Idaho and western Wyoming. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, just sparse shrubs, distant hills, and from time to time a fence that seemed to lead nowhere. I hadn't seen another car for more than an hour. The fuel gauge had been hovering just above empty for far too long for my comfort. I had passed what I thought was the last town about 30 kilometers earlier, just a cluster of buildings that looked abandoned even from the road. My phone had lost signal that morning, and I was too tired to care. I was operating on that autopilot you develop on long trips, when the body handles the driving and the mind wanders somewhere else entirely. The sign appeared without warning. Exit 47, half a mile. No town name, no listed services, just the number. I don't remember seeing it on the map that morning, but I also don't remember looking very closely. I took the exit because I didn't have much choice. The ramp curved downward and merged into a 2-lane road that looked like it hadn't been resurfaced in decades. There were no visible buildings, no indication that the exit led anywhere. I drove for about 10 minutes, watching the fuel light come on, but soon I spotted the motel. It sat back from the road, separated by an empty parking lot with weeds sprouting through cracks in the asphalt. 2 stories, maybe about 24 rooms in total, arranged in an L shape. The sign out front read, "Wanderer's Rest." The letters faded but still legible. There were no cars in the parking lot, no lights on in any windows, even though it was already getting dark. I went in because I had no options. The office was located at the corner of the L, marked by a blue door that had been repainted so many times that the wood beneath looked thick and warped. I remember standing beside the car for a moment, listening. The silence was absolute. No sound of highway traffic, no wind, no birds, just that heavy silence you sometimes find in the mountains. But we weren't in the mountains. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the office was smaller than I expected, but large enough for the desk and the man sitting behind it. He raised his eyes when I entered, and I've tried so many times to clearly remember his face, but I can't. I remember that he was older, maybe around 60 with grey hair. I remember that he was wearing a plaid shirt. But when I try to imagine his features, they slip away from me like water. "Need a room?" he asked. His voice was normal. That's what I remember most clearly, how absolutely normal his voice sounded. I said yes and asked about gas. He replied that there was a station about 5 miles farther down the road, open until 9. It was a little after 6 at the time. I paid for the room in cash, and he handed me a key attached to a plastic tag with the number 14 printed on it. He didn't ask me to sign anything or show any identification. The room was on the 2nd floor at the far end of the building. I remember climbing the external stairs, my footsteps echoing in that strange silence. The door stuck when I tried to open it, the wood swollen from humidity or age. Inside, everything was old but clean. A bed with a floral bedspread, a small television, a bathroom with green tiles. The kind of room you'd expect to find in thousands of motels across the country. I dropped my bag and went to look for the gas station. The road continued beyond the motel, winding through low hills. I drove exactly 5 miles, watching the odometer. There was no station. The road simply ended at a rusty gate blocking access to what looked like a Forest Service area. I turned around and drove back, looking for some entrance I might have missed. There was nothing. When I returned to the motel, the office was dark. I knocked on the blue door, but no one answered. My car was the only vehicle in the parking lot. although I was sure I had seen a white pickup truck near the office when I arrived. Now I don't have a clear memory of that truck, only a vague sense that it should have been there. I went back to the room. The light outside the door flickered, casting irregular shadows along the corridor. I tried to turn on the television, but every channel showed only static. My phone still had no signal, and the clock on the nightstand read 7:23, the numbers glowing in a strange amber tone. I don't remember deciding to stay. I imagine I didn't have much choice. The idea of driving back to the highway with an almost empty tank in the dark seemed worse than spending a night in a clean room with the door locked. The silence got worse after nightfall. I sat on the bed and tried to read a book I had brought, but I couldn't concentrate. I had the constant feeling that I should be hearing something, the hum of an ice machine, voices from other rooms, cars passing on the road. There was nothing. Even the normal settling sounds that old buildings make, cracks and creaks, were absent. Around 9 o'clock, I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Slow footsteps that stopped in front of my door. I waited for a knock. It never came. The footsteps continued, reached the end of the corridor, and then began to return. This went on for maybe 20 minutes. I looked through the peephole once, but the light outside had already gone out completely, and I couldn't see anything. I must have fallen asleep, although I don't remember lying down. I woke up with daylight and a knock on the door. When I opened it, the man from the office was there, exactly as he had been the night before. He asked if everything had been satisfactory. I asked about the gas station. He seemed confused, said he didn't know what I was talking about. He had never mentioned any station, he said. The nearest services were back on the highway, in the town I had passed 30 kilometers before the exit. I tried to argue, to remind him of our conversation, but the words sounded strange in my mouth, as if I were describing something I had dreamed, not lived. He waited politely until I stopped talking, and then said that checkout was at 11. My car started on the first try, which surprised me considering how low the fuel had been. I returned to the highway without incident. The ramp merged smoothly into the interstate. By some miracle I managed to reach the next town, filled the tank, and bought coffee at a gas station that was bright, noisy, and full of people. 3 weeks later, already settled in my father's old house in Pennsylvania, I tried to find the motel online. I searched every variation I could imagine. Wanderer's Rest, Exit 47, motels in eastern Idaho, motels in western Wyoming. Nothing matched. I found the highway on the map and traced the route I had driven. Exit 47 did not exist in that stretch. The numbers jumped from 45 to 52, completely ignoring the intermediate exits. I told myself I must have remembered the number wrong. I spent hours looking at satellite images of the region, searching for L-shaped buildings, parking lots, anything that confirmed what I had experienced. The landscape looked different from above, flatter and more arid than I remembered. I found nothing. A few months ago I drove that route again. I'm not sure why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I had imagined everything, or maybe I needed to prove the opposite. I drove slowly, attentive to the exits. The highway looked different in summer, the hills green instead of brown, but the basic geography was the same. I didn't find the exit. I didn't find the motel. I stopped at a rest area and sat in the car for a long time, trying to reconcile my memories with what I was seeing, or failing to see. What bothers me most is not the impossibility of it. It's how clearly I remember certain details, while others have completely disappeared. I can visualize the floral pattern of the bedspread, the exact shade of green of the bathroom tiles. I can remember the weight of the key in my hand, the resistance of the door when I pushed it, but I can't remember the man's face. I can't remember what I ate that night, or if I ate anything at all. I can't remember what I was thinking during those hours in the room, even though I know I was there for several hours. Sometimes I wonder if I had some kind of breakdown. The stress of the funeral, the long trip, the isolation. It makes sense. It would explain everything in a clean, rational way. I've been told that grief can do strange things to memory, that the mind protects itself by building barriers around traumatic periods. But then I'm doing something ordinary, washing dishes or driving to work, and I remember the silence. Not the absence of sound, but its quality, how it seemed to have weight and texture, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. This wasn't imagined. I know the difference between remembering something and inventing something, and that silence was real. I stopped talking about it with most people, because when I mention this story, their eyes glaze over or they smile in that cautious way people use when trying to be kind to someone they think might be unstable. I understand. If someone told me this story, I'd probably react the same way. But sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I open a map of that highway on my phone. I zoom in and out, tracing the path with my finger, looking for something I know I won't find. And occasionally, just for a moment, I see what looks like a small road branching off from the interstate. When I zoom in further, it disappears. A bug in the map software, probably. A rendering problem, probably. I am 43 years old now. 17 years have passed since that trip. I've moved houses several times, changed careers, gotten married and divorced. I've lived a normal life, with normal problems. Most of the time I don't even think about the motel. But every time I pass an exit that's not on the map, every time I see a motel off the highway, with no cars in the parking lot, I feel something tighten in my chest, a recognition perhaps, or a warning. Sometimes I wonder if he's still there, waiting outside some unmarked exit in the middle of nowhere. I wonder if that man still sits in the office, ready to hand keys to travelers who take the wrong turn. I wonder if those footsteps still echo down the hallway at night, never knocking, never stopping. And I wonder, though I try not to think about it, if I've really left. If you know what might have happened to me, please answer in the comments. I hope one day to find an answer to what happened that day. Thank you for watching.